So we're going to end with a few huge companies that Sequoia missed out on for various reasons. So let's go into three notable companies that they passed on. First is Twitter. So this one we know a little bit about. Roloff Botha, current CEO, mentioned how Sequoia met with the Twitter team in 2007 to discuss whether Sequoia would invest in Twitter's Series A round. And they passed on the investment for a few reasons. Roloff simply said Twitter of 2007 was much different than Twitter of today. That's basically all he said. I thought, well, Jack Dorsey of then was not Jack Dorsey of today. Today, if Jack Dorsey started a company, he could have the pick of the litter of VCs because of Twitter and because of Square. But none of those were a success back in 2007. So, backing him wasn't a sure thing. And many early investors in Twitter knew one of the co-founders, Evan Williams, who had founded Blogger and Odeo and had successful exits with those companies. So many early investors just said they backed Twitter because they knew Evan Williams. Chris Sacca has a funny story that Evan Williams basically said, "Hey, I'm starting a company. You should give me money. It'll work." And Chris Sacca just said, "Okay, here's $25,000. I mean, sometimes it's that simple in venture capital. Chris Sacca, lowercase capital. We'll talk about them in the future. Really cool stories, especially with Twitter. But Sequoia didn't know Evan Williams super well. That wasn't enough to just be like, okay, we'll invest in them. We'll give you a Series A round, which is a significant investment, just because they kind of knew one founder and knew he had some successful exits. But what about the other co-founder? He hasn't really had any successful exits yet. So you can't really rely on that. And second, Twitter of 2007, as I said, is a lot different from Twitter today. The iPhone hadn't even been released yet, let alone the App Store. So tweets were just messages sent to mobile phones via SMS. It's like someone was just texting you their tweets, all the time. And that's just a really different business. And so again, the iPhone wasn't out, the App Store wasn't out, so it wasn't clear that would change. We didn't know what apps were going to be because that wasn't a thing. Like, sure, you could go online, like go to twitter.com and look at tweets back then, but mobile is, where the money is. Mobile is more valuable than the web. So using mobile is good, but not if it's so clunky and archaic as it was back in 2007. So maybe you can see where they came from and why they passed. Tweets were, it's like you got a text from your phone that one of your friends just said, "I really like tacos," or just saw the new Spider-Man movie. Peter Parker's really cool. Like, it's just not that interesting. Like, now Twitter's the hub of news, in my opinion. Like, I go for it for news and for interesting people's takes on the news. That was not the case back then. And it was probably in very few people's minds that would be eventually the case. So I understand why Sequoia passed. Hard to take lessons away from this. I guess it's just like, obviously Jack Dorsey and Evan Williams, they had this vision. Evan Williams was a successful founder. They knew Twitter wasn't great now, but technology will unlock better capabilities for it. Like, it's hard to see that. But, if the founders can really paint that compelling vision and they've built successful companies in the past, it might be worth taking an early stage investment flyer on it. They might figure it out. If they don't, you learn interesting things and you built your network with a few interesting founders and you tried an interesting product. And I think Twitter's interesting because, like, just the idea of like the social platform of just text, of just all things information, like, that's something that could happen in the future. Like, if you have something that could happen if certain technology falls the right way, just with a little bit amount of luck, like, if you can see that world at the early stages, that could kind of be worth an investment. So I don't know if the founders were as visionary as the Airbnb people, for example, but if they paint that vision in a compelling way and you could kind of see how that world could unfold, it might be worth that investment. But again, Twitter one, I can understand why that was tough. Regardless, big miss for Sequoia. Twitter, IPO'd at 40 some $billion, I'm pretty sure. So that one hurts. Next up, Salesforce. And this one was really hard to find information for. In one video I watched, Jim Gates literally said something Salesforce, comma, which we passed on, comma, and went on back to his point. So I was like, oh, passed on Salesforce. That's a huge miss. Let me find out why. Couldn't find anything from Sequoia, but other investors, such as Ron Conway of SV Angels, incredible investor, someone we'll certainly talk about later. I'm excited to do that episode, but he said they passed because of the high price. So I was like, oh, how high was the price? Well, I looked, and Salesforce did raise 3 venture capital rounds in 1999 alone. And so that, first of all, raising 3 rounds, the A, the B, the C, all in 1 year is unheard of today. I mean, even at crazy times, that's probably not going to happen. And in 1999, if you're Sequoia, there's so much going on. Like, there are so many tech companies popping up every day that you can invest in. So many opportunities. Like, why would you pay up so much for one company that wasn't going to be a sure thing? Like, you see so many other opportunities for better price, might as well go with them. I'm sure that's what Sequoia was thinking at the time, but that's not a great way to think about investing. I've heard so many times that VCs say they passed on a company that ended up being successful because of price. And as we know, venture capitalists, you have to stay aggressive. You have to make investments, especially in the early stage. Instead of investing $4 million for 20% of a company, you have to invest $6 million for 20% of a company. That's a decent chunk out of your fund, certainly. But if you're able to handle that chunk out of your fund, I mean, it's worth the investment, because again, these, if that valued the company at 20 million or 30 million after you made that investment, if it's a multi-billion-dollar company in the future, that doesn't matter. You're still making hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. So if you can manage it in your fund, if you can make the money work, and if you see this company as like, you're really like, wow, this can be a big company. I see the future. Great founder, like, checks all the boxes. It's worth paying up for, because paying more for a higher potential outcome is a better decision than paying less for less potential outcomes. If you just play like the probability metrics on that, like multiply the price based on the percent of success of those investments, like, it's worth more paying up for a higher percentage of success. That's the whole point of just risk and reward. So try not to pass on investments because of price, because you'll probably be doing one of those tweets eventually where you say you missed an investment because of price and you regret it. So try to eat that price if you can, to get involved with those companies with really great opportunities and great potential. So the last one, if any of you know Sequoia, if any of you have seen The Social Network, you may have seen this coming. If you haven't seen The Social Network, watch it. Great movie. But the next one, Facebook. So for those of you who don't know the story, Sean Parker was a very close advisor to Mark Zuckerberg, in the very early years of Facebook. He was a senior employee. He was basically Mark Zuckerberg's like big brother, closest advisor, really supported him. And so Mike Moritz was on the board of Sean Parker's former company, which was called Plaxo. And Mike Moritz supported a decision to fire Parker from his own company. And obviously, Sean Parker didn't like that and held quite a grudge to all the VCs on his board, especially for Mike Moritz. So Sean Parker, being the big brother figure for Mark Zuckerberg, who's only like 20 years old, I think, at this time, used Zuckerberg to get revenge on Sequoia by, egging Mark on to show up to the Sequoia office for the pitch with all the partners, Don Valentine, Doug Leone, Mike Moritz, Sequoia brought everyone into the meeting because Facebook was the hottest company in the valley. And so Zuckerberg shows up to the meeting late, shows up in pajamas, and the worst part, which is kind of funny, shows up with a presentation that says nothing about Facebook. The presentation is titled, Why Sequoia Should Not Invest in Wirehog. He pitched on a completely different company and explained nothing about Facebook. And the final slide was just like a summary, why you shouldn't invest in Wirehog, or something about why we won't take money from Sequoia, something like that. He basically said, because Sean Parker's involved, and we're only here because Roelof bought the assets to come, and we like Roelof. The whole investment was just a train wreck, or the whole pitch was just a train wreck. So Sequoia obviously didn't get to invest. Mark Zuckerberg has said, he's regretted doing this. Obviously, that's a little childish. But it's unclear whether Moritz was a poor partner to Sean Parker. I mean, as an investor, your boss is the people who give you money to invest in companies. Like the LPs, the limited partners, are the people who give you the money. And those are college endowments, Stanford endowment, Harvard endowment, or community college endowments, or HBCU endowments, like really important causes that need their capital to grow so they can give more scholarships to students or get better equipment to give to students, or even nonprofits. Red Cross can be investors in Sequoia. Pension funds, the San Francisco Police Department pension fund can be an investor in Sequoia. So Sequoia's most important partner are the people who invest in them. The founders come second, even though some of them don't like to say that. That's the reality of venture. So maybe Moritz was right to fire Parker because he was hurting the company and therefore hurting Moritz's bosses, who are these endowments that give them, and nonprofits that give them the money to invest. And so maybe he had to make that decision. It was the right thing to do, but it's unclear whether he was, for simple word, kind in the process. I mean, clearly Parker was really mad, whether he was mad because they made that decision and Moritz was a jerk about it, or whether he was just mad and Moritz was trying to be nice about it, but just couldn't convince Parker any other way. I don't know. I was unable to find that information, but regardless, this prohibited Sequoia from investing in Facebook. So the lesson here, whether there's a lesson or not, Mike Moritz seems like a good person. He has a good reputation. So I'm not saying he was a bad partner or not, but again, VC is important to be a good partner to founders. You never know when it could come back to bite you in the future. The founder community is small. A lot of them know one another, and the VC reputations are loud. So be a good partner no matter what, in any situation, positive or negative. But I do say this with a nice caveat, because I'm sure Sequoia is okay with passing on Facebook, because they got a little bit of a consolation prize when Facebook bought WhatsApp and returned $4 billion for Sequoia. So I'm sure Moritz felt a little better about that. I'm sure that helped him sleep a little bit better at night. But anyway, there's the anti-portfolio of Sequoia. Nobody's perfect.